"Daddy isn't dead. He's underneath the floor," said the little black girl, and the police officers began digging. Police Chief Mike Thompson nearly spit out his coffee when he heard those words coming from a 5-year-old child. Kesha was sitting in the police station chair, swinging her small legs and holding an old teddy bear. She said it so naturally, like someone talking about what they ate for lunch. "Daddy is down there where Mommy put the new floor tiles." "Kids have such big imaginations," mumbled Sergeant Davis, not even looking up from his paperwork. She probably watched a scary movie. But there was something in Kesha's eyes that made the officer stop and think. Those big, serious eyes didn't look like a child making up stories. They looked like someone who had seen something terrible, something no child should ever see. Thompson knew that look. He had seen it in people who had been through horrible things, but never in such a young child. The neighbor who brought the girl to the station, Mrs. Williams, a 67-year-old black woman, kept saying that something was very wrong. "Officer, Marcus Johnson has been missing for 4 days now. It's not like him to just disappear and leave his daughter behind. That man wouldn't even go to the store without telling someone where he was going." Thompson knew Marcus by sight. He was a well-respected engineer in the town, always on time for his daughter's school events. He was the kind of father who carried pictures of his daughter in his wallet and never missed her school plays. The difference between him and his wife was like night and day. Vanessa Johnson had only come to the police station once to file a missing person report about her husband. She did it as easily as someone renewing their driver's license. She was a well-dressed white woman who spoke with that talking down tone Thompson recognized too well, the voice of someone who had always been listened to because of her skin color and her money. "My husband sometimes travels for work without telling me," Vanessa had said, fixing her expensive purse. "It's no big deal. Marcus is unpredictable." The way she said unpredictable sounded as fake as a counterfeit dollar bill, but Thompson hadn't paid much attention to it at the time. "Officer," Mrs. Williams whispered, looking around nervously, "there's something I didn't tell you." The night Marcus disappeared, I heard screaming coming from the house. Strange noises, like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. And the next day, a construction company showed up, working late into the night. Thompson felt a chill go down his back. What kind of construction work? The kitchen floor. Vanessa said it was a surprise for Marcus when he got back from his trip. The sarcasm in the woman's voice was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The officer barely remembered Vanessa mentioning a small home improvement during her statement, but it had seemed unimportant at the time. Now, looking at Kesha, Thompson felt like he had missed something very important in that first conversation. The girl was drawing on the paper he had given her, creating what looked like a bedroom with a man lying under a checkered floor. The details were disturbingly accurate for a 5-year-old. "Kesha," Thompson said, getting down to the child's eye level and making his voice as gentle as possible. "Where exactly is Daddy?" "In the new kitchen," she replied without hesitation. "Mommy said it was our secret, but Daddy is very cold down there. He cried very loudly before he went quiet forever." Mrs. Williams covered her mouth with her hands, horrified. Davis finally looked up from his paperwork, realizing for the first time how serious the situation was. "Kesha, sweetheart," Thompson continued in a calm voice. "Can you tell me what happened the night Daddy went quiet?" The girl looked at her teddy bear as if asking the toy for permission to tell the secret. "Mommy hit Daddy with a big pot from the kitchen. Daddy fell to the floor and didn't get up. Then Mom cried a lot and said it was his fault for being stubborn and not listening." A deadly silence fell over the police station. Thompson felt his heart beating fast in his chest. And then what did Mom do? She took the blue sheet from my room and wrapped Daddy all up in it. Then she dug a big hole in the kitchen and put him in it. Then the men came with new floor tiles and covered everything up. Kesha spoke as if she were describing her grandmother's cake recipe. Her casual tone made it all the more disturbing. What Thompson didn't know was that at that very moment, 40 miles away, Vanessa Johnson was in her private lawyer's office calmly, explaining why she needed to speed up the life insurance process for her missing husband. She had no idea that Marcus Johnson had discovered something about his wife's cryptocurrency investments that was worth much more than his own life. Much less did she imagine that Kesha, despite her 5 years of age, was keeping secrets that would turn this routine missing person case into the biggest criminal case the city had ever seen. As he looked closely at the girl's drawing, Thompson noticed a detail that made his blood run cold. She had drawn not only a man under the floor, but also small rectangular bags next to him, as if she knew exactly what else was buried in that hastily renovated kitchen. If this story of mystery and injustice has already caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to discover about what really happened in that house goes far beyond anything anyone could have imagined. What else had Kesha witnessed on that terrible night? And why did a 5-year-old girl know details about a crime that even the police hadn't investigated yet? The answer was buried along with much more than just a body, and each new discovery would make this case even more shocking. Thompson knew he had something much bigger than a simple missing person case on his hands. 2 hours after Kesha's revelation, he was on the phone with Judge Morrison trying to get a search warrant for the Johnson house. "Mike, are you asking me to authorize digging up a family's backyard based on the testimony of a 5-year-old? The judge's voice sounded doubtful over the phone. "That won't hold up for 5 minutes in court. Sir, we have a child who has described specific details about a crime, a suspicious renovation carried out immediately after the disappearance, and a wife who is showing unusual coldness for the situation." Thompson felt frustration rising in his chest. "And do you have any physical evidence? Adult witnesses? Anything besides the word of a traumatized little girl?" Thompson hung up the phone harder than he intended. 20 years on the force, and he was still facing the same problem when it came to wealthy white families. Bureaucracy became an impossible wall. Davis approached the desk with a serious expression. "Chief, I just got an interesting call. Vanessa Johnson was at her lawyer's office this morning. It looks like she wants to speed up her husband's life insurance claim." "How convenient." Thompson rubbed his temples, feeling a familiar headache coming on. "How long has Marcus been missing?" "Days, and she's already chasing money." At that moment, the station phone rang. Davis answered, and after a few seconds covered the phone with his hand. "It's her, Vanessa Johnson. She wants to talk to you." Thompson took a deep breath before answering. "Officer Thompson speaking." "Sheriff, this is Vanessa Johnson. I heard my daughter was there today." Her voice was controlled, but there was an underlying tension she couldn't completely hide. "Your daughter is fine, Mrs. Johnson. She was worried about her father." "Kesha has a very active imagination, Sheriff. I hope you didn't take a little girl's fantasies too seriously." The talking down tone was unmistakable. Thompson felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of fantasies specifically?" "Oh, you know how kids are, always making up stories about monsters under the bed, people buried in the backyard." Vanessa laughed awkwardly. "It's just her way of coping with her father's temporary absence." "Interesting that you mentioned people buried, Mrs. Johnson. Your daughter was very specific about the location." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Officer, I hope you're not considering disturbing a grieving family based on the fantasies of a traumatized child. My lawyer would be very disappointed in such an unprofessional approach. The veiled threat was crystal clear. Thompson knew the game. Influential families always had expensive lawyers ready to turn police investigations into bureaucratic nightmares. Just doing my job, ma'am. Have a nice day. After she hung up, Thompson stared at the phone for a long moment. In her career, she had learned to read people, and Vanessa Johnson had just confirmed her suspicions in the worst possible way. No one spontaneously mentions people buried unless they have a very specific reason for it being on their mind. Davis approached again. Chief, there's one more thing. I got Marcus's phone records for the last 30 days. Interesting. He made several calls to a divorce lawyer the week before he disappeared. Thompson felt a piece of the puzzle fall into place. And there's more. A quick check of the county records. The house is in his name, inherited from his father. If he died without a will, it would go to his wife. But if there was a divorce, she would lose everything. Thompson leaned back in his chair, the picture becoming crystal clear. Financial motive, opportunity during the renovation. And now we know she had urgency. At that moment, Mrs. Williams entered the station accompanied by Keisha. The girl ran straight to Thompson as if he were a longtime friend. Detective Thompson. Mom is mad at me for talking about Dad, Keisha said, climbing onto the chair next to his desk. Why is she mad, sweetie? She said they're going to take her away now and I'll be all alone. But I told her you seemed nice, and you won't let that happen. Thompson's heart sank. This innocent child had no idea of the gravity of the situation she had unleashed with her brutal honesty. Keisha, do you remember anything else about the night your daddy was quiet? The girl thought for a moment. Mommy cried a lot after that, and she talked on the phone with a man who called her my love. Daddy never called her that. Mrs. Williams and Thompson exchanged meaningful glances. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place, an extramarital affair. And do you know who that man on the phone was? I don't know his name, but he came to the house once when Dad was at work. Mom said he was Uncle Richard, but Dad doesn't have a brother. Keisha swung her legs in her chair. And they kissed on the mouth like Mom and Dad used to do before they started fighting all the time. Thompson closed his eyes for a moment. A 5-year-old had provided more useful information in 2 conversations than many detectives could get in weeks of investigation. Keisha's innocence was both a blessing and a curse. She saw everything but didn't understand the devastating implications of what she had witnessed, while Vanessa Johnson was probably at home coldly calculating how to expedite the life insurance, process and plan her new life with her lover. A brave little girl had just handed justice the information it needed to unravel a premeditated murder. What the arrogant widow didn't know was that every veiled threat and every elaborate lie only dug her grave deeper, while the innocent truth of a child became the most powerful weapon Thompson had ever held in his hands. Thompson knew that taking on an influential family would require more than police intuition. It would require surgical strategy. While Vanessa Johnson probably slept peacefully, confident in her expensive lawyers and political connections, the officer spent the night building a case she would never see coming. Davis, I need you to do something unofficial for me, Thompson said, lowering his voice in the empty station. Do you know anyone at the phone company who can help us with cell phone location records? Davis smiled mischievously. My brother-in-law works there. What kind of unofficial information do you need? Marcus Johnson's cell phone location on the night of his disappearance, and, if possible, Data from the tower closest to the Johnson home. Thompson scribbled notes in a notebook he kept away from the official files. I want to know if his phone was stationary in any specific location. Meanwhile, Mrs. Williams had become an unexpectedly valuable ally. The retired lady had something Thompson desperately needed: time, patience, and the invisible ability that only elderly neighbors have to observe everything without being noticed. "Sheriff," she called mid-morning, whispering into the phone. "Vanessa is packing 2 big suitcases, and that man Kesha mentioned, Uncle Richard, is helping her." Thompson felt his adrenaline spike. "Can you see his license plate?" "I already wrote it down. And there's more. They're taking boxes out of the basement. Boxes that look too heavy for 2 people to carry with such difficulty." "Mrs. Williams, you're a better detective than half my officers." Thompson smiled for the first time in days. "Keep watching, but keep your distance. If they realize they're being watched..." "Sheriff, I have 70 years of experience watching people. They won't notice me." The pause in the conversation was interrupted by Davis, who returned with information that would make Vanessa Johnson completely rethink her arrogance. "Thompson, my brother-in-law got the data. Marcus Johnson's cell phone was stationary at his residence from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. on the day of the disappearance. After that, the signal just died. Exactly the time Kesha said she witnessed the argument and assault." Thompson closed his eyes, feeling the pieces fall into place. "And you were able to identify Uncle Richard?" "Richard Steinberg, 42 years old. Financial advisor. And here's where it gets interesting. He has a cryptocurrency company registered under the name of..." "Guess who? Vanessa Johnson." "Exactly. A shell company registered 3 months before Marcus disappeared. They've been planning an exit for a long time." At that moment, Thompson had an idea that would make all the difference. He called Dr. Patricia Moore, a renowned child psychologist, and one of the few people he trusted completely to handle sensitive cases. "Pat, I need a favor. I have a 5-year-old girl who witnessed something traumatic. She's already spoken to me, but I need someone with your experience to validate her statement so that it's irrefutable in court." "Mike, you know that statements from children this young are rarely accepted as evidence. This is different, Pat. This child has details that only an eyewitness could have. And if we can document it properly with your expertise, we have a real chance of getting justice." Dr. Moore agreed to meet Kesha that afternoon. Meanwhile, Thompson prepared his riskiest move, confronting Vanessa Johnson before she could get away, but this time with questions she would never expect. "Davis, let's pay Mrs. Johnson a social call. Nothing official, just check in to see how..." "She's handling her husband's disappearance." Thompson's smile had a predatory quality. Sometimes the most arrogant people make the stupidest mistakes when they feel too secure. As they drove to the Johnson home, Thompson knew he was playing a dangerous game. Vanessa had probably already called her lawyers, but there was one thing that all the money in the world couldn't buy: the innocent truth of a child who hadn't yet learned to lie. What Vanessa Johnson didn't know was that every veiled threat, every condescending smile, and every attempt to use privilege to escape justice only fueled the determination of a man who had dedicated his entire life to protecting the vulnerable from the powerful. And when the truth finally came out, no lawyer would be expensive enough to contain the damage. Arriving at the house, Thompson noticed the suitcases in Richard's car and smiled inwardly. Guilty people always make the same mistake. They think they're smarter than everyone around them. But this time, arrogance would be the very instrument of his downfall, and justice would come through the honest words of a brave girl who refused to keep secrets about the father she loved. "Thompson, knocked on the Johnsons' door with the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. When Vanessa opened the door, her fake smile disappeared when she saw the determined expression on the officer's face. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm glad to find you still here. From what I can see, you're getting ready for a trip." Thompson discreetly pointed to the suitcases in Richard's car, who quickly hid behind the curtain. "Just a long weekend to clear our heads while we wait for news about Marcus." Vanessa tried to keep her tone casual, but her hands were shaking slightly. "Interesting, especially considering that I just discovered something fascinating about your husband's cell phone." Thompson took an envelope from his pocket. "Cell tower data shows that his phone was stationary here at your house from 10 p.m. until exactly 3 a.m. on the day of his disappearance. After that, the signal dropped completely." Vanessa's face went pale visibly. "He must have forgotten his charger. Funny, because Kesha told me that was exactly when she witnessed you attacking Marcus with a cast-iron skillet." Thompson watched every micro-expression on Vanessa's face. "And there's more. We found your shell cryptocurrency company registered jointly with Richard Steinberg." At that moment, Richard appeared at the door, clearly nervous. "Vanessa, who is that? Richard Steinberg, I presume? The Uncle Richard Kesha mentioned?" Thompson smiled coldly. "Interesting how a 5-year-old can be more honest than 2 adults with college degrees." "You can't prove anything." Vanessa tried to regain her composure, but her voice already sounded desperate. "It's just speculation based on the fantasies of a traumatized child." Thompson laughed darkly. "Speculation, Mrs. Johnson. While you thought you were being clever, Mrs. Williams has been documenting your every move, including the heavy boxes you took out of the basement earlier today." The blood drained completely from Richard's face. "Vanessa, you said no one was paying attention." "Shut up!" Vanessa screamed, completely losing control for the first time. "And there's more," Thompson continued, relishing every second of the revelation. "We've gained access to the bank records of your shell company. Suspicious transfers, money disappearing from Marcus's joint account, and attempts to speed up the life insurance. Did you really believe you could murder a man, bury him in his own home, and still profit from it?" Richard began to sweat visibly. "Vanessa, you told me he had agreed to an amicable divorce. You lied about everything." "You idiot." Vanessa turned on Richard like a cornered animal. "You believed a man like Marcus would split his inheritance with me? He was going to leave me penniless." Thompson watched the pair collapse with satisfaction. Arrogant people always destroy themselves when the pressure mounts. "You know what impresses me the most?" Thompson continued calmly. "You completely underestimated a 5-year-old child. You thought you could manipulate Kesha into keeping quiet about her own father's murder." "What kind of monsters do that?" Vanessa was shaking with rage and despair. "That girl doesn't understand anything. She doesn't know what she saw. She knew enough to lead us straight to her father's body, and she knew enough to describe exactly how you killed Marcus with an iron pot while he had his back turned." Thompson moved closer. "And the most ironic part, if you had treated Kesha with love and care, she might never have spoken. But you terrorized her so much that she trusted strangers over her own mother." Richard began to cry uncontrollably. "I didn't know she was going to kill anyone. I just helped with the money." "You helped bury the body, Richard. Kesha saw you digging with her mother." Thompson showed no mercy. "And now you're both going to get to know the justice system you tried to cheat." Vanessa made one last desperate attempt. "You can't trust the word of a child against 2 respectable adults." "Respectable adults?" Thompson laughed openly. "A murderer and her accomplice who tried to profit from the crime. And what about the child?" She gave us information that led directly to physical evidence, telecommunications data, and financial records. Kesha's innocent truth was more reliable than all of your elaborate lies. At that moment, sirens began to wail in the distance. Thompson had called for backup before arriving. The most pathetic thing of all, Thompson concluded as the police cars approached, is that you destroyed a family, traumatized an innocent child, and ruined your own lives out of pure greed. Marcus Johnson was a decent man who deserved much better than a murderous wife and a cowardly death. Vanessa collapsed, in tears of despair when she realized there was no way out. Richard tried to run, but Thompson had already blocked all escape routes. The arrogance that had sustained them for days had completely evaporated, replaced by the raw panic of those who finally understood that justice had come at the hands of a brave girl who refused to keep secrets about the father she loved. As the wow. Handcuffs clicked around their wrists. One question hung in the air. How would Kesha react when she learned that her courage had brought justice to her father and freedom to herself? 6 months after the trial that shocked the city, Thompson was in his office when he received a call that made him smile for the first time in weeks. It was Mrs. Williams, now Kesha's legal guardian, with news that warmed his heart. "Sheriff, you need to know. Kesha is thriving at her new school. The psychologist said she's recovering beautifully, and yesterday she asked me if she could write you a letter." Thompson looked out the window, remembering the brave little girl who had changed everything with her brutal honesty. And how is she handling everything? "She understands that her mother did something very wrong, but she doesn't hold any anger. Yesterday she said to me, 'Grandma Williams, I helped Daddy not be forgotten, right?'" The woman's voice broke. "That child has a wisdom that many adults will never have." Meanwhile, at the state women's penitentiary, Vanessa Johnson was discovering that privilege and money don't buy respect among inmates. Sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, she spent her days in isolation, shunned even, by other prisoners who despised someone who would kill her own husband and traumatize a child. Richard Steinberg was no luckier. Sentenced to 25 years as an accomplice, he lost not only his freedom, but also the entire fortune he had helped Vanessa steal from Marcus. The cryptocurrency investments that had seemed so smart evaporated when authorities froze all the Shell company's accounts. The irony was delicious. Two sophisticated adults who thought they were too smart to be caught by a 5-year-old ended up destroyed by the very innocence they tried to exploit. Dr. Patricia Moore, the psychologist who had documented Kesha's trauma, became a fierce advocate for the rights of child victims of domestic crime. "The Kesha Johnson case changed how we treat child testimony," she explained in lectures across the country. "A child who hasn't learned to lie can be the most reliable witness there is." Thompson often received calls from other detectives consulting on similar cases. The Kesha Protocol, as it became known, established guidelines for investigating crimes based on children's accounts, saving dozens of families from similar situations. The house where Marcus was murdered stood empty for months until Mrs. Williams suggested something that made Thompson smile. "Why don't we turn it into a community center? A place where kids can play and feel safe to speak up when something is wrong." The proposal was unanimously approved by the City Council. The Marcus Johnson Center has become a symbol of how a child's truth can transform tragedy into hope. On the first anniversary of Marcus's death, Thompson visited the grave with Kesha and Mrs. Williams. The girl, now 6, placed yellow flowers, her father's favorite, on the grave and whispered, "Daddy, everyone knows you were a good man. No one will forget." Thompson knelt beside Kesha. "You know you're a hero, right? Because of your courage, your father got justice, and you're safe." Kesha smiled with that ancient wisdom that some children develop after weathering storms. "I just told the truth, Uncle Thompson. Grandma Williams taught me that lying hurts more than the truth." Months later, Thompson learned that Vanessa had tried to appeal the sentence, arguing that a child's testimony should not have been considered. The request was denied in less than 24 hours. The judge was clear. Credibility has no age. This child has shown more integrity and courage than many adults who have come before this court. The last news about Richard came through the newspapers. He had lost his mind in prison, repeating obsessively, "The girl knew." The girl knew everything, until he was transferred to the psychiatric ward. Thompson kept in his drawer a photo that Mrs. Williams had taken of Kesha at the community center playground, smiling on the swing that had been donated in memory of her father. Whenever a difficult case came across his desk, he would look at that photo and remember, sometimes justice comes through the most unlikely voices. The arrogance of Vanessa Johnson, who believed she could manipulate a child and cheat. The system had become her own social and legal death sentence. And Kesha, the little girl who just wanted her daddy not to be forgotten, proved that the truth whispered by an innocent heart is more powerful than all the lies concocted by corrupt hearts. If this story touched your heart and made you believe that justice still exists, subscribe to the channel to discover more cases where the courage of ordinary people defeated the arrogance of those who thought themselves untouchable. Because sometimes the greatest victories come from the smallest warriors.